Welcome to the Contract Teardown Show from Law Insider, where legal experts tear down contracts from some of the most well-known companies and high-profile executives around the world.
In this episode, attorney Shavon Smith returns to talk about another government contract, this one a subcontract. So, let's tear it down. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Contract Teardown Show from Law Insider. I'm Mike Whalen. We've got a new season coming, and for that we brought one of our old friends, Shavon. How are you today?
I am excellent, and thank you for referring to me as your friend.
Hey, look at that. So, Shavon, I do that for all the people I owe money to. So, Shavon, you and I have had a conversation before. You have a really popular episode about government contracts, and I would encourage people to go back and watch that one. It's done really well, but it made me want to come back and have another conversation with you about a document that I'm going to share with the folks at home. This is called a subcontract issued by Hanford Mission Integration Solutions. Shavon, what is this document? How does it relate to what we talked about before? When are we going to run into this kind of thing?
Yes, great. So last time we talked about a teaming agreement, and a teaming agreement are parties who are agreeing to go after a scope of work together, and they're going to submit a bid, and hopefully they will be awarded that bid. This is a subcontract, and that means party has been awarded a bid, and they now have pieces of work that they will not completely do themselves, and they need to work with other people to get that done. What's interesting about this subcontract is there certainly had to be some sort of teaming agreement because Hanford Mission Integration Solutions is a consortium of several big government contractors. It's Leidos, it's Parsons, it's a few others, and they are working together for a Department of Energy project. So that is what is before us. So it is a consortium of several companies. They were awarded a contract by Department of Energy, and this appears to be their template subcontract that they use when they're bringing in other people to do work.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of TBAs and TBDs. If you look at the subject, the headline at the beginning of the contract, it says this subcontract is effective as of TBD between Hanford Mission, et cetera. The statement of work, which we'll talk about. There's a lot of things in there that say we'll talk about it later. To your point, sounds like this is a form. So we're going to go through this thing point by point and sort of pull out the ideas that you thought were relevant. Let's start with A1. This is the statement of work. I'm going to read that. Except as specified elsewhere in the subcontract, subcontractor shall furnish all labor and materials necessary and required to satisfactorily perform tribal nation support to HMIS, dated, etc. The statement of work is incorporated into this subcontract along with all other clauses and terms identified herein. So, all right, so I'm assuming that tribal nation support is a project that was granted. This is sort of a broad statement that there's going to be other documents. Is that it's referring to a third document? Am I right?
So yes, the A1 is referenced as the statement of work. It is in some ways a separate document, but it's certainly incorporated into this. And so because this is a template agreement, they would use this same subcontract over and over again, and then they would have a separate kind of statement of work depending on who they were working with, what the actual work was. So yes, a separate document, but it's certainly incorporated into this. And when I'm discussing with my clients, sometimes I review the statement of work, but it's a very kind of factual document, exactly who's doing what, maybe how much they're doing it for, but it's certainly something that you want to review closely to make sure it is aligned with the proposal that you send into the government as well.
Is there anything in this language that makes you say, I don't like that, or is there something about this process that you like? Because it seems to me that a statement of work obviously gives you the flexibility, like a master service agreement or something that you can be under this one contract, but you can add to a lot of it. Do you think the way they've done this with incorporating that other document, that seems like best basic practice, right?
Yeah, and you raise a good point about having this one subcontract, and maybe there are multiple statements of work that you're referencing, or maybe you have to update the statement of work at some point without having to change the entire agreement because perhaps the scope of work changed over the course of time.
All right, let's jump to A3 contract type because this is a sentence that means absolutely nothing to me, and I'm hoping you can tell me what this means. All right, A3 contract type. This is a firm fixed price type subcontract. That's a lot of words. What does that mean?
It really means exactly what it says it means. It means that the price is fixed and it's firm. So whatever your experience may be up or down in performing the work, the government is not going to change, or in this instance, the subcontractor is not going to change the price. So if you said, I can deliver this to you for $500, whether it costs you $100 or $700, we have agreed that this is a fixed price, which is different than, say, a time and materials contract where you may have a couple labor categories. You will put some rates next to those labor categories, and then you will bill accordingly for the time and materials. And then another, contract type is cost plus. So my cost to do this job were X, and in addition to that, I'm adding on this amount of profit. But when you do that, you do have to prove your cost to the person. So that may or may not be an ideal contract type. Sometimes the profit margins are small, but firm fixed prices, the price is set. Now, there doesn't mean there aren't maybe a few mechanisms if something drastic happens, i.e. COVID, where you have to kind of go back and recalculate price. But you have the price that is in the contract.
But the point is, I mean, I'm seeing these words capitalized, firm fixed price. So I assume this is a term of art that is used. Is this set by the government that is saying, okay, you got the contract, whatever this company was called, everybody who contracts with you, they don't have a choice but to use this type of contract because that's what we signed up for. So I guess what I'm asking is, if I'm that third party, if I'm the subcontractor, do I have to sign on for this kind of price, or could I negotiate for one of the other pricing setups?
So a couple of points. Yes, these terms are defined somewhere, typically in a federal acquisition regulation in the FAR or whatever your state regulations may be. So these are actually defined terms somewhere. In terms of what you sign up for, you will typically sign. A lot of times the proposal or the bid process will say what sort of contract that it is. And so you are kind of signing up for the thing that's being solicited.
So there's a lot of standardization, presumably,
Exactly.
as we've talked about before in these government contracts. All right. Okay, let me take you down. I'm gonna scroll you down to Section H. There's a section titled Subcontract Clauses. I want you to talk about what this is doing. It seems like this is sort of governing the relationship between the two sides as a contract would, but especially I want you to focus on H3, clauses incorporated by reference. Tell me what H is doing and then that specific clause.
Absolutely. So H in general, when you are bringing on a subcontractor, a lot of times there are mandates about their size. So, maybe sometimes you have to work with an 8A contractor. Maybe some portions of your contract have to go to smaller businesses. So H1 talks about your certification of your size, your socioeconomic status. And if any of that changes, you have to let us know because we have, authenticated to the government or anyone else that we are using certain subcontractors to comply with the law. So H1 kind of talks about certifying your status under certain certifications that you may have for a business. H2 was giving us notice if that changes at any point in time, kind of mandating that you stay compliant so that we stay compliant as well. And H3 talks about clauses incorporated by reference. So this one talks about federal acquisition regulation, which we mentioned, and Department of Energy acquisition regulation clauses that are going to be incorporated by reference. So what that means is there are a whole host of things that you are bound to in this contract that don't necessarily appear in this contract. And the very last line of that section even says the text of these clauses, will send them to you if you ask for them, but go kind of forth and prosper yourself and figure it out. So that's another thing kind of when you're dealing with government contracting. Obviously you have the document that's in front of you, but there's a whole host of other things. And that's not even uncommon in the commercial context. You may be doing business with Amazon or Xerox, and they have a ton of policies that they reference in their contract that are on a website somewhere. So remembering that the documents in front of you is not the whole universe of documents that you're bound to.
Yeah, I like that it says you can go read that if you want to, but we really don't care. Like as my wife would tell the kids, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. All right, jumping up to D1, I've got inspection of services, definitions. It's defining the services. The subcontractor may be required to provide and maintain an internal quality control inspection system. Again, I'm wondering how much of this language, tell us about this, but I'm wondering how much of this language is the contractor saying to the subcontractor, these are our standards, and how much of it is saying, hey, man, these are the Fed standards. We're just telling you about them. Nothing we can do. What do you think about D1 inspection of services?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, maybe it's their standards, but they're being held to a standard and they need to be able to, ascertain that you're doing certain things, that your product is a certain way, that it is what you've wanted it to be, so that they can go in and inspect and kind of double check all of your work. And usually these inspection clauses give you some, what's the word I want to use? It doesn't have to be immediate. So we can inspect maybe something you did a few months ago, just to double check your work, or if we've been asked to inspect it as well. So that's what this is in reference to.
All right, well, let's talk money. A6 payment terms. Payment will be made within 30 calendar days after receipt of a properly prepared invoice, unless otherwise agreed to between subcontractor and HMIS. This I've seen all the time with subcontractors, especially.
Yes.
You're kind of subject to the boss's payment terms, but now you're trying to make payment terms with the people under you. What do you think about A6, what it's doing? Does it do well in that relationship?
So what's interesting is it is 30 days within receipt of an invoice. Sometimes when you are government contracting, you will condition the payment of your subcontractors on you getting paid. So it is, within 7 days or 30 days or 15 days, of us getting paid for the work that we built for that included you, then we will pay you. This is within 30 days. And I think a lot of that has to do with the economics of who these contractors are. They probably can withstand paying people on a 30-day cycle, even if they haven't been paid by the government, because they can keep their subcontractors working without issue. The properly prepared invoice is a word that says a lot, without saying a lot, because if you scroll through this long document, there's a whole section that talks about what invoicing is, what a proper invoice is, and it's 30 days from a proper invoice. And I have seen people really go back and forth, and it is 45 days before the invoice is accepted. And so your payment clock doesn't start ticking until you get the invoice exactly in the form and fashion that is required of you. So the actual creating of the invoice is very much so an art as well, and making sure that it conforms to every term in the contract so that you're making sure you're getting paid timely.
I'm going to ask you to step back and revisit the conversation we had in the teaming agreement. That one was interesting to me because you got two peers, basically, that are coming together and saying, we're negotiating this deal upwards together. This is different, obviously, because the negotiations have already happened and the subcontractor is just kind of joining on. I love standardization, right? The upside of it is you can get deals done quickly. Everybody kind of knows what they're getting into. And if you don't, there's an out. Dad told me I have to do it this way. But I'm also seeing a lot of difficulty with making new deals. What are you seeing about standardization in these kinds of deals? In practices, you're doing this. Do people normally follow these forms? To your point about the payments, there seems to be some flexibility there. Where are you seeing flexibility? And where is it, you just have to get over it. We're going to roll. Do you like that?
I'm seeing flexibility certainly in the scope of work, the partitioning of the work between the parties, like the percentage of work that may be kind of split between the parties is certainly. Intellectual property is hard because the entity you're doing the work for, the government, they want to control and own everything. So, people certainly want to be able to maintain ownership of things that they've created. And so carving out, maybe things that you created before the contract versus things that you created during the contract. So that's certainly always a place of negotiation. And I would say terms. So this contract, the term was a year, and I think maybe there were some option years on the other end. So sometimes you want to negotiate. Well, if I know that you have this contract for 3 option years, like sign me up for the same option years that you're on as well. So that is also another place where people may want to discuss and negotiate, like sign me up for kind of the same terms you have for the length of the agreement.
And it may seem obvious because we deal with this in basically every kind of contract. You got to know where the flexibility is, and you have to know where your leverage is while you're making these kinds of deals, because you just might not have it. Well, I appreciate you sharing this document, Shavon. We're going to make sure it's posted over at lawinsider.com/resources so the folks at home can go and check out this contract. For people who want to connect with you and learn more about what you do in this space, what's the best way to contact you?
Certainly, I am on LinkedIn with my name, Shavon J. Smith. Instagram, Shavon J. Smith. The website is the SJS Law Firm, and we love to meet new people, connect with new people.
All right. Well, we'll make sure all those links are available over at lawinsider.com/resources. And if you want to be a guest on the Contract Teardown Show, just reach out. I'm at community@lawinsider.com. We would love to have you. Thank you again, Shavon, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Contract Teardown Show from Law Insider. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show. We really appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.